The suitcase was already by the door. Not hers, mine. Not because I was ready, but because I had learned to expect moments like this. Quiet detonations disguised as conversations. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes empty, as if the words she was about to say didn't matter anymore. Like this was just a formality. "Let's take a break," she said. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why. I just nodded like I was checking the weather. There was no fight. No raised voices. Not even a tear. Just her, standing there like a manager letting an underperforming employee go. She even used the phrase, "It's just temporary." I wanted to laugh, but nothing about it was funny. It was all too polished, too practiced. I walked out with that same suitcase 3 minutes later. I didn't even grab socks. Here's the part no one tells you. When someone says, "take a break," they've already taken it. Emotionally. Mentally. Probably physically, too. You're not being asked, you're being informed. I checked into a roadside motel that smelled like bleach and old gum. Spent the first night staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time she touched me without pulling away after 3 seconds. I couldn't. I tried to recall the last time she kissed me like she meant it, not like a duty. Nothing came. By day 3, I stopped checking my phone. There were no messages. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a middle-of-the-night text saying, "I miss you," or, "I didn't mean it." Instead, silence. Which is worse than anger. Silence is cold, calculated. It means they're not even thinking about you enough to be mad. By day 5, I went back to the house to grab some clothes. The key still worked. Her shoes were gone from the rack. My coffee mug had been moved. There were 2 wine glasses drying on the counter, one with lipstick that wasn't hers. A detail I would have missed if I hadn't spent years memorizing the exact shade she wore. I didn't ask. I didn't wait. I grabbed a sweater and left. Weeks passed. I faded. Like a picture left in the sun, not torn, not crumpled, just slowly erased. People stopped asking how I was. I stopped offering answers. My texts went unanswered, even the ones where I just said, "Hope you're okay." Then one night, 3 months after she told me to take a break, I opened social media like a fool. There she was, wrapped around someone new. Not a stranger. Someone I recognized. A guy she once called a joke. A guy who always seemed to text her at weird hours and whose name she'd mutter with a laugh, "He's harmless." Harmless. They were at a cabin. Hers? Ours? It didn't matter. He was holding her waist like he'd been doing it for years. She looked happy, or at least practiced at pretending. I didn't comment. I didn't rage. I just logged out and never opened the app again. But something strange happened after that. A week later, a message. From her. One line, "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. 2 days later, I made a mistake. Still, I said nothing. Then came the voicemails. First soft, then frantic. She was crying in the last one, saying she didn't expect me to disappear. She thought I'd waited out, that this was just a phase. She didn't know I'd been silently breaking long before she ever said, "Let's take a break." She didn't know that by the time she spoke those words out loud, my soul had already packed its own suitcase. Now she wants me back. But I already took my break, and this time it was permanent. I didn't vanish to punish her. I vanished because I couldn't bear to be visible anymore. Everything around me had turned into a constant reminder that I had been downgraded from partner to placeholder. And the cruelest part? She didn't even try to hide it. Maybe she thought I'd be too fragile to handle the truth. Maybe she didn't care. But I wasn't fragile, just hollow. And hollowness doesn't crack. It echoes. It was about 2 months into the break when I found out the truth. Not hints. Not suspicions. Cold, explicit truth. I was sitting in a dingy laundromat 3 towns away, scrolling aimlessly through an old folder in my email, trying to distract myself from the slow spin of my life literally tumbling in circles, when I stumbled across a message that wasn't meant for me. It had been forwarded by mistake from our shared cloud account. An email from her to a mutual friend, Carly. It started with, "You were right about Vince." My stomach clenched. I knew that name. Not from memory, but from context. That name had been floating around in the air for the past year. I just never connected the dots. Never wanted to. I forgot what it felt like to be desired, she wrote. With Lyle, everything felt safe, comfortable. But Vince made me feel charged. Like I mattered again. I sat there staring at the sentence, rereading it a dozen times. She didn't say I hurt her. She didn't say I neglected her. She said I made her feel safe. And somehow, that wasn't enough. I was too soft, too stable. She wanted sparks, even if they came with burns. That night, I threw out every piece of clothing I had brought from our home. I bought a cheap thrift store jacket and wore it out of the store without removing the tag. I didn't want a single thread on me that had touched her life. The next morning, I received a voice memo from her. "I don't know what's going on with you," she said, her voice thin, exhausted, "but I'm starting to feel like I lost something I didn't know I needed until it was gone." A pause. Then, "I don't even know where you are." I didn't answer. It would have been easy to say something cruel. I had 1,000 things I could have thrown back at her. But silence has a weight that words don't. And if I'd said even one sentence, I would have opened a door she didn't deserve to walk through again. She began posting stories on social media that I knew were for me, photos of places we'd been, songs we used to share. A note scrawled on a napkin with the caption, "Should have listened sooner." One image showed her sitting on a bench by the lake where we used to watch the sunset in October. The same lake where I once told her, "Even if you ever feel lost, I'll always be your home." Now she was there alone, with no one beside her. She looked cold. Not because of the weather, but because regret chills the bones more than winter ever could. I got another message from her sister. "She's not doing well," it read. "You should at least talk to her." Why? So she could apologize now that the thrill had worn off? So she could reach for the comfort she abandoned the second someone more charged came along? I had become the shelter she ran from, now desperately trying to crawl back into, because the storm she ran toward had no walls. But the real twist? I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way people expect. What I felt now was something else, something quieter and darker. I felt free. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up wondering if I was enough. I didn't feel like I had to beg for space in my own relationship. I didn't feel invisible. She made me invisible. And now I was gone. And that's when her real panic started. The first real sign that she was spiraling came when she tried to access my bank account. That caught me off guard, honestly. I had locked everything down quietly after I disappeared. New accounts, new passwords, new address, no forwarding information. But I kept one old card open because it was still connected to the auto-renew for my truck insurance, and I figured she'd never notice it. That was my mistake. One Monday morning, I got a fraud alert text. It said there was an attempted charge at a boutique jewelry store 2 towns over from where we used to live. I stared at the message, confused. I hadn't bought anything, and I sure as hell wasn't buying jewelry. I called the bank, and they told me someone had tried using my saved payment method for a purchase, same shipping address she and I used to share. The purchase didn't go through, but it didn't have to. I already knew who it was. It wasn't even about the money. It was about the desperation. The woman who once told me I was too cautious was now trying to claw her way back into a version of our life that no longer existed. And maybe that's what stung the most, not that she cheated, not that she lied, not that she walked away with someone else, but that she assumed I'd be right where she left me, still holding the pieces of what she broke, just waiting for her to decide I was worthy again. The next day, I got a letter. An actual, physical letter. The envelope had no return address, just my name and the town I now lived in, not even my full street address. That meant she was guessing. Or worse, that she was circling my new life like a hawk. I opened it with shaking hands. It was handwritten, 4 pages long. Her words ran frantic and slanted, with blotches where her pen must have paused too long. Or maybe where tears hit. She wrote things I never thought I'd hear from her, not because she wasn't capable of remorse, but because I never believed she'd feel it. She said Vince was a mirage, that he had only wanted the version of her that existed in fantasy. That once she became real, once the dishes piled up and the moods came and she got anxious and messy and hard to manage, he pulled away. Said he needed his space. That line made me scoff. How poetic. She said she couldn't sleep. That the silence from me was worse than screaming. She admitted that every time she looked at her phone and didn't see my name, her heart dropped. I didn't know what stillness felt like until you were gone, she wrote. Now I hear myself think, and I don't like what I hear. The letter ended with, if there's any version of you that still believes in me, even the tiniest shred, please talk to me. Please. I don't know how to fix this without you. I folded the pages carefully, put them back in the envelope, and I burned it in the sink. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't smile. I just stood there and watched the flames consume her apologies like they were nothing but ink and old air. Because the truth was, even if I had answered, she wouldn't be talking to the man she used to know. That man, the one who bent over backward to make her comfortable, who excused red flags as growing pains, who tried to love her into loving him back. He died quietly the night she packed up and said, it's just a break. What was left of him got buried under silence and cheap motel ceilings. What she was chasing now was the ghost of a man who no longer existed. And in that reality, she was truly, completely alone. The next phase of her unraveling was loud, messy, public. And I heard about it not through gossip, but through sheer chance and overheard conversation in the most random of places. I was at a tire shop in a completely different city, waiting for a rotation on a set of used wheels I'd picked up for cheap. I was sipping weak coffee in the corner when two women walked in, both mid-30s, dressed for brunch, talking fast, not paying attention to who could hear them. "I still can't believe she flipped the table," one of them said. "Right there in the middle of the restaurant. Vince just sat there, frozen. Honestly, I think she scared him." That name made my heart slow down and speed up at the same time. "Is she okay now?" the other asked. "Honestly, no. She's spiraling. Keeps saying she ruined everything, and now she has no one." They paid and left. I sat in that cheap vinyl chair, completely still. My stomach clenched and turned. Not because I felt bad for her. I wasn't there yet, but because it confirmed something I didn't expect. She had actually lost control. The woman who used to call me too emotional now couldn't even hold herself together in public. The woman who once said she envied my calm now smashed plates in upscale cafes. And the man she traded me for? He didn't stick around to help pick up the shards. He just watched her fall apart and stepped away, clean and unscarred. The irony was bitter, even poetic. She'd left stability for electricity. And when the storm hit, there was no shelter left. Later that week, I received a text from an unknown number. Just one line. "I miss how you made the room feel." No name. No emojis. No explanation. But I knew it was her. It read like her. The phrasing. The rhythm. That was her old trick, trying to appeal to the side of me that cared about moments instead of facts. It used to work, but not anymore. Still, I didn't block the number. I just let it sit there. Read. Unanswered. I kept trying to convince myself I felt nothing, that I was finally free of her gravity. But the truth? I felt something darker than love or hate. I felt used. I felt erased. Like I'd been a stepping stone on her path to something shinier, and now that the shine wore off, she was looking backward and realizing the stones don't float. One night, I sat on the floor of my tiny rental apartment, bare mattress behind me, ramen in a cracked bowl beside me, and I played one of the old voicemails she left. I hadn't listened to it all the way through before. It was the third one she'd sent after the letter, the one where her voice cracked like static. She said, "I still sleep on the left side of the bed. It's stupid, I know. But I keep thinking if I leave the right side untouched, maybe you'll come home." I paused it there. My hand hovered over delete, but I didn't press it. Because a part of me, the sad, pathetic, used-up part of me, still needed to know that she regretted it. That she wasn't sleeping peacefully while I stared at moldy ceilings and fought off loneliness like a disease. And here's the most twisted part. The more she reached out, the more I began to see what she was really doing. She wasn't asking for me back. Not really. She was asking to be forgiven. She wanted to feel clean again. She wanted to erase the guilt and shame and pretend like this had all been some chaotic chapter in an otherwise pretty story. But the version of me that used to offer forgiveness like candy? That man wasn't sitting in that apartment. That man was gone. Burned out. Replaced by someone who finally knew his own worth, even if he didn't always believe in it yet. So I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I didn't post anything cryptic or dramatic. I just let her sit in the silence she created. And in that silence, something in her began to break for real. Not performative. Not performanced. Real. Raw. Fractured. And the moment I realized she was finally feeling what I felt that first night in the motel, that bottomless ache, that absolute stillness where nothing feels real, I knew I wasn't the one broken anymore. She was. And she had no idea how to put herself back together. It was around the 5th month that the story stopped being about her and started becoming about me. Up until then, everything I did was a reaction to her absence, her betrayal, her sudden need to crawl back. But something changed the day I ran into someone who didn't know anything about her. A total stranger, someone who wasn't connected to that past life in any way. And for the first time, I introduced myself without tying my identity to the guy whose wife took a break and never came back. Her name was Maribel. We were both waiting for a delayed bus after a rainstorm had flooded the underpass. She had one broken heel and was laughing about it. The laugh wasn't forced. It wasn't manic. It was just present, unapologetic. She offered me half of her sandwich, and I refused, but we ended up talking for almost 2 hours. About music, about books, about childhood fears. Nothing heavy, and yet it hit me harder than anything my ex ever said during those last few months. Because Maribel listened. Not with pity, not like I was a man in pieces, just like I was there. A full person, worth hearing. I never even got her number. That wasn't the point. The point was that I realized I still had something left in me, something untouched by the wreckage she left behind. And that's exactly when she found out where I was. She didn't knock. She pounded. It was 6:12 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and I was brushing my teeth in the tiny bathroom when the banging started. At first, I thought it was an emergency, a fire or a break-in, but when I opened the door, there she was. Hair messy, eyes wide, a hoodie over pajamas. No makeup, just desperation wrapped in a woman-shaped apology. "I found your car," she said, breathless. "I've been driving around for hours. I just needed to see you." I stood in the doorway, toothbrush still in my hand, wondering if this was real or some twisted hallucination. I hadn't seen her in person in over half a year, and now she was standing there like she hadn't ghosted me for another man, like she hadn't tried to buy forgiveness with voicemail tears. "I can't do this outside," she added quickly. "Please let me in. Just 5 minutes." She looked so small. For a moment, I almost stepped aside. Almost. But then I remembered everything. The silence. The cold dinners. The way she once looked at me like I was a burden. The nights she rolled over and sighed when I touched her arm. The wine glass with someone else's fingerprints on it. I remembered begging in silence, waiting for her to just look up from her phone and see me. Not as furniture, not as background noise, as a man, her husband. And now she was standing on my doorstep like the world owed her closure. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. She blinked. "You won't even talk to me?" "I don't know what I could say that you didn't already decide for me when you said, 'Let's take a break.'" "I didn't mean forever, Lyle," she said, voice cracking. "I was scared. I was stupid. I thought I needed space, but I just needed you." That word, you. It hit like a dart, trying to pierce something already scarred shut. "I needed you too," I said, soft but certain. "And you weren't there." We stood in silence. Even the birds were quiet, like the universe was holding its breath. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small note. Folded, creased, smudged with something that looked like mascara. She held it out. "I wrote this 3 weeks ago," she whispered. "But I wasn't ready to give it to you until I looked you in the eyes." I didn't take it. She stood there holding it until her hand started to tremble. When I didn't move, she slowly dropped it on the doormat and stepped back. "I'll go," she said finally. "I just wanted you to know. I remember everything. Every kindness you gave me. Every time you held me when I didn't deserve it. I remember all of it. And I carry it with me. I just hope someday you'll believe that." She turned and walked away, her shoes soaking into the morning dew on the sidewalk. I closed the door gently, locked it, sat down on the floor. I didn't touch the note for 2 days. When I finally did, it said 3 words. I lost everything. She didn't mean money, or reputation, or her relationship with Vince. She meant me. I don't know what I expected after she left that morning. Maybe a sense of peace, some finality. Maybe I thought I'd feel victorious, like I had finally taken back control over my life. But what I actually felt was something a lot more complicated. Not sadness, exactly. Not guilt. More like exhaustion. Not physical tiredness, but a deeper kind. The kind that comes from carrying around the weight of someone else's decisions for far too long. For a few days, I avoided everything. I turned off my phone. Didn't check emails. Ignored the calendar reminders that used to mark anniversaries and birthdays and pointless appointments that no longer mattered. I walked a lot, through unfamiliar neighborhoods, along dirt paths by the river, through alleyways that smelled like wet leaves and regret. And everywhere I went, I kept thinking about that note. I lost everything. She meant me, yes, but she also meant herself. Because whatever version of her existed before she said, "Let's take a break," the woman who used to laugh at my terrible jokes, who used to fall asleep on the couch and pretend she hadn't been snoring, that woman was gone too. She didn't just lose me. She lost the version of herself that was still good. And deep down, I think she knew it. A week after that visit, I got an email from her sister. The subject line was simple: "I'm only sending this once." Inside was a link to a private video. It wasn't a trap or anything cruel. It was a recording, clearly taken by someone trying to remain hidden, of my ex sitting alone at a bar, talking to herself more than the bartender. The camera wasn't focused and the sound was fuzzy, but I heard enough. She was rambling, not drunk, just unfiltered. She told me he used to write me little notes, she said, tapping her empty glass. And I never kept any of them. Can you believe that? Not one. I just threw them out. Like they were trash. The bartender didn't say anything. She kept talking. He bought me a coat I said I loved. But I didn't. I just said that so he'd stop asking if I was cold. He was always asking. He always noticed. And I thought that made him weak. Another pause. A long one. I didn't cheat because I didn't love him. I cheated because I hated myself. And I wanted someone else to prove I was still worth wanting. Vince didn't even know me. I let him know the version of me I invented for him. But Lyle? He saw the real me. And I ran. I stopped the video there. Because hearing my name in her mouth again after all this time, like it was sacred now, something she had to say softly, it messed with me in ways I wasn't ready for. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept playing back old memories I thought I'd buried. Like the time she sprained her ankle and I carried her 3 blocks back to the car. Or the time I cried when my dad passed, and she sat with me on the kitchen floor, rubbing circles on my back without saying a word. Those moments weren't fake. They were real. And that made everything harder. Because you can't hate someone who once held your broken pieces like they were something precious. But then I remembered the nights I laid in bed alone while she was out with friends. The way she flinched when I tried to touch her. The sound of her voice when she told me I was making too much out of nothing. I remembered the vacancy in her eyes when I asked her what I'd done wrong, and how she looked at me like she couldn't even be bothered to answer. And I remembered the silence. The silence that stretched for weeks after she left, where I waited for anything, a message, a sign, an apology, and got nothing. Just air. That was the loudest betrayal of all. So no, I didn't reply to her sister. I didn't acknowledge the video. I didn't write back, tell her I saw it. I didn't do anything. Because this wasn't about me giving her a path back to me. This was about me realizing I never should have left the door cracked open in the first place. What's broken isn't always meant to be fixed. Sometimes it's meant to stay broken, so you never forget what it cost you to heal. And she was finally learning what it meant to stand in the ruins alone. It was almost poetic, the way she began to appear in places that used to be mine. Places she never bothered with before. I started seeing her name on social media comments of people I barely knew anymore. She liked an old photo of mine from 2 years ago. That was no accident. That was deliberate. That was a signal. She wanted me to know she was still watching. Still orbiting. Then came the real curveball. A postcard. No envelope. No return address. Just a photo of the old trail where we used to hike every fall. We hadn't been there in years. She always said it was too muddy and full of bugs. But there it was in my mailbox, bent and faded. On the back, for words, in her handwriting, I walked it alone. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't understand the message, but because I understood it too well. She was trying to prove something. To show me she had changed. That she was doing things she used to roll her eyes at, just to feel close to the version of me she destroyed. A few days later, I found her again. This time, in person. Not by her choice. It was an accident. A bookstore downtown. I had gone there because it was quiet and anonymous, and I liked the way the second floor creaked under your feet like it had secrets to tell. I was halfway through flipping a poetry collection when I felt that familiar chill on the back of my neck, the kind you only get when someone is staring at you. I turned. She was there, standing at the end of the aisle, not moving, just watching me. For a second, everything around us disappeared. The shelves, the overhead lights, the rain outside tapping against the windows. It all blurred. I didn't speak. Neither did she. It was the kind of silence that presses against your ribs like weight. I didn't know if I should walk away or scream or ask her why she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She took a step forward, then another. And then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I was hoping I'd run into you." I didn't say anything. "I've been walking by this place every weekend," she continued. "I never thought I'd actually see you again. Not like this." Still, I stayed quiet. I wasn't sure who I was anymore when I was around her. She had a way of pulling the air out of a room without even trying. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say sorry again. Instead, she said something that cut straight through me. "I've been living in that break we took. Like it never ended. Like I never left it. It just kept stretching." I exhaled slowly, setting the book back on the shelf. "And what exactly do you want me to say to that?" She blinked, clearly caught off guard. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just wanted you to know that I'm still here. That I finally understand what I did. You don't, I said, calmly. You understand what it cost you. That's not the same thing. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing rehearsed. I continued, you didn't just take a break. You lit a match and walked away like it wouldn't catch. But it did. And I sat in the smoke while you danced in the light. She looked down at her shoes, swallowed hard. I thought you'd still be waiting. That was it. The core of everything. I know, I said. That's why I'm not. She looked up, eyes red, but I didn't care. The moment wasn't about her feelings anymore. It was about mine. The ones I buried while she played house with someone else. The ones I sacrificed so she could chase some fantasy of who she thought she was supposed to be. She nodded slowly, like she was trying to accept something her heart hadn't approved. Goodbye, Lyle, she whispered. And just like that, she turned and walked out. No more letters. No more messages. No more, what if, lingering in the air. The sound of her footsteps faded down the stairs, and I stayed right there, surrounded by old books and the echo of the man I used to be. I didn't follow. Because the break was over. And so was the story. At least for her. They always say time heals everything, but I don't think that's quite true. Time doesn't heal. It reveals. It shows you who was really there, who truly mattered, and what parts of yourself you were never supposed to give away in the first place. And for a long time, I didn't trust any of that. I thought healing was just something people said to fill silence, like a generic fortune cookie line when no one knew what else to offer. But they were right, not in the way I expected, but in a way that mattered more. It's been almost a year since that last bookstore moment. The final time I ever saw her. No more postcards. No more voicemails. She stopped reaching out the day she realized I wasn't an option anymore. And I stopped waiting the moment I realized I wasn't the same man she left behind. There's something freeing about watching someone walk away, not because you want revenge or satisfaction, but because you finally feel peace watching the door close. That's what that final goodbye gave me. Silence. Not the suffocating kind she left me in after our break, but the kind you get when the storm has passed and you can finally hear your own breath again. I moved since then. Left behind that dingy apartment and its peeling walls. Got a place with windows that actually let the sunlight in, and a kitchen big enough to cook something better than sad microwave dinners. I even hung photos, not of people, but of places I'd never seen before. A promise to myself that I'd go there someday. And I did. 3 months ago, I took a train north. No itinerary. No company. Just me and a camera I barely knew how to use. I ended up in a coastal town with streets that smelled like pine and sea air. And that's where I met Lena. No, she didn't fix me. This isn't that kind of ending. I fixed myself. But Lena, she saw me. Really saw me. Not as someone to mold or save, but as someone worth sitting beside on a cold bench while seagulls screamed overhead and salt stuck to her lips. She asked questions no one else ever bothered to ask, not just where I was from or what I did for work, but what made me laugh when I was a kid. What my mom used to pack in my school lunch. What I thought about when I couldn't sleep. We didn't rush. There were no fireworks. No cinematic confessions. Just long walks, shared playlists, and the comfort of knowing I didn't have to shrink myself to fit inside someone else's idea of love. And somewhere between a rainy morning and a warm cup of coffee by the sea, I realized I had let go of her. The woman who said, let's take a break. The woman who thought I'd always be waiting. She became a chapter, necessary, painful, but no longer present. I'm not angry anymore. I don't even hate her. I hope she's okay, wherever she is. I hope she found herself in whatever silence she carved out. But more than that, I hope she knows I'm not hers anymore. I'm mine. For the first time in a long time, I'm not looking back. I'm not waiting. I'm not chasing anything or anyone. I'm simply here, whole, steady, and finally free.